Once upon a time in the kingdom of Abada, there lived a wise and just prince named Chike. Chike faced a dilemma as he struggled to choose among three friends: Ojugo, Ekema, and Ada, each with unique qualities. These three girls were friends since childhood, doing everything together. They hailed from reputable homes, and their families were friends with the royal house. Their unique and admirable qualities made it challenging for Prince Chike to decide whom to marry. Therefore, he opted to subject them to various tests to determine the most suitable choice. Firstly, he invited them to the palace and tasked them with preparing various meals for the royal household. They successfully prepared delicious meals, impressing the prince, yet complicating his decision. After the meal, they shared joyous moments together. While the girls were occupied in the kitchen, the prince neatly placed items in their bags: a golden bracelet in Ada's bag, some money in Ekema's bag, and his mother's jewelry in Ojugo's bag. After spending some time with the royal house, the girls grabbed their bags and headed home. On getting home, Ekema opened her bag and saw some money. She knew she never left with such an amount of money, so she suspected the money must be from the palace. She returned the money to the prince, who denied knowing anything about it. She insisted the money wasn't hers and belonged to the royal house, advising the prince to investigate within his household to know who might have mistakenly placed it in her bag. Then she departed. Hours later, Ojugo returned with the queen's jewelry and gave them to her. The queen, surprised, questioned how her jewelry had ended up in Ojugo's bag. She summoned the maids, but before they could come, she looked at the prince's expression and realized he did it. Then she asked Ojugo to leave and promised to look into the matter later. The prince was astonished by the unexpected turn of events. 2 days later, Ada returned the prince's bracelet. She said she found it in her bag same day and knew it belonged to the prince. Despite the prince's denial, Ada insisted it was his bracelet because he was the only one that could afford such an expensive bracelet in their community. She dropped it and left. Just when the prince thought the decision was getting easier, it became even more challenging. Who should he choose? Moving to the second test, he took them to the market and asked them to pick as many things as they want: jewelries, clothes, shoes, and bags. His aim was to know who would pick excess, but to his greatest surprise, they all picked the same thing: one bracelet, a pair of shoes, one cloth, and one bag, all the same design. The prince was surprised. He urged them to pick more, for what they had selected are nothing compared to what he wanted to spend on them. But they declined, stating they had many in their house and wouldn't need much. They advised the prince to spend this on the poor, for they need it more than they do. The prince went home angrily. Without speaking to anyone, he went to his room and drafted another strategy, which he said one of them must fail. To assess their reactions and handling of situations, he individually invited them to the palace. He invited Ojugo, and when she arrived at the palace, a maid accidentally spilled dirty water on her. The maid immediately apologized. Kneeling down, Ojugo closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and asked her to get up. She asked for a place to clean up. The following day, Ada was invited, and during their meal, a maid accidentally spilled draw soup on her. Ada calmly stood up, glanced at the maid, and walked away. Shortly after, she returned with cleaned clothes, explaining that the soup was too hot. She apologized for the way she left the dining table. She begged the prince not to punish the maid, acknowledging it was an unintentional mistake. On the following day, Ekemma was invited, and upon arriving at the palace, a maid accidentally spat on her while passing by the balcony to see the prince. Disgusted, her heart was filled with anger. The maid apologized and quickly rushed to clean her, but Ekemma took the rag from her and cleaned herself. She advised the maiden to be careful next time. When the prince inquired about the incident, Ekemma brushed it off, leaving him astonished by their varied responses. The prince found himself in a more challenging situation. All three girls proved to be commendable in their own ways, making his decisions even more difficult. During a casual moment at their favorite spot, the prince claimed that ladies love money the most, but the girls disagreed, insisting they were different. To put their claim to test, he sent a messenger to each of them, and on the letter he gave to the messenger, he stated, "The king will be giving out some money to the first 20 maidens to arrive at the palace in preparation for the New Yam festival." He highlighted his wish for them to be among the people that would get the share. In the last paragraph of the letter, he mentioned that he won't be around because he was receiving treatment at his friend's place, whose mother was a herbalist. Ada and Ojugo, not paying attention to the last part of the message, rushed to the palace. However, Ekema, upon reading the message, instructed the messenger to take her to where the prince was supposedly receiving treatment. Arriving at the supposed location, Ekema brought food and fruits for the prince. Curious about the others, the prince inquired, and the messenger informed him that they had rushed to the palace. When Ekema was questioned about her decision not to go, she emphasized the prince's life was more important than the money. She reasoned that if the prince died today, who will share the money for the next festival? The prince asked, "So you believed in sustainability?" To which she confidently replied yes. The prince was impressed by Ekema's response, solidifying his belief in her sincerity. To finalize his decision, he subjected them to the last test. He took them to a hut that was in the middle of a burning fire. He explains that there was a child inside the hut that needed a rescue. However, to save the child, they had to pass through the burning fire. Ada and Ojugo retracted, asking if he wanted them dead, because the burning fire was too much. After some moments, Ekema said she would go and save the child. Then she ran towards the burning fire. On getting to the middle, the fire quenched. She stopped and looked by the side. She saw a magician. It happened that the prince had orchestrated a fake burning fire with the magician's help. Shocked as he was, the prince questioned Ekema about her decision, wondering why she attempted to go through the fire, knowing it was impossible for her to pass through the fire and come out alive. Ekema confidently replied, "I know you are a humble and just prince who loves his subjects and can't stand watching a fly die. I knew there was no way this would be true, and you will stand here seeking for who to save the child, without finding means to save the child yourself." Impressed by her response, the prince quickly asked her to marry him. Surprised, Ada inquired if the burning fire was part of the test, and the prince confirmed it. But still surprised, "How did you know?" he asked them. The prince never knew Ada and Ojugo were aware of the test all this while, and were playing along, pretending to be royal and humble. But what they did not know was that the prince could go this far just to pick the best among them. In the end, Prince Chike realized that true character revealed itself through challenges and selfless action. Ada and Ojugo, although good in their own ways, couldn't match Ekema's genuine understanding of the prince's intention. And so, the wise and just prince chose Ekema as his bride, a tale of friendship, test, and a journey that led to the discovery of the most sincere heart. The kingdom of Agbada celebrated the union, and Prince Chike learned that sometimes the right choice emerges not only from visible qualities, but also from a deep understanding of the heart, and they all lived happily ever after.